Welcome and good afternoon, everybody, for joining us today on this very exciting webinar on the 6 pitfalls of cloud migration. I'm very delighted to have a very special guest friend and old colleague, Alejandro Martinez here from Propelling Tech, to join me and to share some of his wisdoms and experiences. But yeah, Alejandro, why don't you introduce yourself? I don't want to steal your thunder.
Thanks, Martin, and really looking forward for this conversation. It really reminds me some of the conversation we used to have in Loom back in Sweden some years ago. So I'm Alejandro Martinez, been in the data, AI, and analytics for 20 years, working a lot with BI and a lot of the big implementations globally for, in our customers. We created Propelling Tech nearly 1.5 years ago, and right now we're challenging kind of the status quo of the consulting itself by speeding up the whole delivery, reducing TCOs by leveraging technologies that are more meant to be for the new architectures using AI and automation.
Fantastic. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Martin Mahler. I'm the founder and CEO of Astrato Analytics. I myself started with BI 12 years ago with ClickView, actually, as a matter of fact. I think both Alejandro and I, we both rode that wave and delivered a lot of very interesting projects. And I think what is actually was quite exciting for when we met again like 2 years ago with Alejandro is that we saw cloud changing things, opening up new opportunities. And that's where we are sitting with Astrato, but also Propelling Tech, working on emerging technologies to drive the next wave, ultimately, of value creation with data. So on the same wavelength. And one thing that we're talking about today is, we have experienced the very first cloud migrations, us, Astrato, from a vendor perspective, Propelling Tech and Alejandro hands-on within projects, small companies, big companies. And there are some kind of common pitfalls that we will discuss and walk you through share your thoughts, our thoughts on, why and how and what can be done to avoid them. I think just to set the scene, the migration to the cloud has been happening, and in essence, cloud BI effectively, I would say almost as one of the very far last parts of a technology stack has to join on that path as well. I think the overall promise of the cloud is that we're moving away hosting infrastructure and hosting technology in-house and having the people to manage that, to outsourcing that effectively with cloud providers, to ultimately have the ability to scale out at without having to scale out at IT costs. So a lower total cost of ownership is the big promise. But that started with the rest of the data stack today: Snowflake, Databricks, BigQuery, some examples, and many more. They now live in the cloud, so BI actually has no choice but to follow through. I cannot imagine a scenario which probably exists today, Alejandro, where there is on-premise BI, ingesting data from the cloud. And AI readiness, I think, is a big topic, but also vendor push. What's your view generally?
Well, like right now we are seeing the on the BI side, I see two things that are happening. And basically is really what happened in the past with the Snowflake and Databricks, and even even Google BigQuery, Redshift, and all the different cloud vendors. But the whole thing is, I always say, in 2012 when AWS came with the cloud, that was just like lift and shift into the cloud, like moving on-prem to the cloud, same databases, same principle, just using the cloud. The real thing on build for the cloud came with these new technologies back in 2016, 2017. That is really what is happening right now with BI. So a lot of vendors have been pushing to go to the cloud, SaaS solutions, and even using competition on pricing. but they were just moving their products that were on-prem to the cloud. So in reality, the same pains that we were suffering there were in the cloud. Right now, it's becoming even a push, not just from the vendors, but the customers itself. At the moment you move your data in the cloud, you want to have everything in the cloud. So one of the pieces that also we're seeing is with the push of AI, a lot of the things are starting more like you need the cloud. Like, I mean, you can really be on-prem, then you can really query your data, you can really use AI, you have a different system, your business logic is in a different BI system, so then you can really leverage the KPIs the business is defining.
Yeah, and you mentioned the example with Redshift, actually, when it came around. Actually, the name Redshift came about that AWS was pushing you to move away from Oracle, shift away from the red logo. But you're right, they were not the big successful technology. It was actually Snowflake that not just went to the cloud, but innovated by segregating storage and compute. And that opened up a whole new paradigm around elasticity and new possibilities. And I think that's the theme here as well today, that Cloud BI is also not a lift and shift. Actually, it is a architectural change and a different design. I think, and that's a little bit of the lessons learned you mentioned here, but I pulled out a quote from a McKinsey study that, most of migration exceed budget and they miss the timelines. That's holistically on cloud, but let's go a little bit deeper on similar type of experiences in Cloud BI in particular. So talking about lift and shift, right? You mentioned that earlier. How do you think does that apply for Cloud BI there? Because that's obviously being promised to some extent that, hey, you have Tableau on-prem, use Tableau Cloud. You have ClickSense on-prem, use ClickSense SaaS or cloud. Is it a matter of just moving? What's your experience?
So the piece goes even into the, let's say, the models, the queries. Like, in order for you to work with on-prem applications, you have certain levers. Let's say you have the RAM, you have servers, but you can do certain things that in the cloud are more expensive. There are things that even don't perform in the cloud at all. Like, I mean, if we're talking about in memory, there are certain operations that you can handle in memory, but then when you're live with your data, you can really handle those operations. So even like if we think on data model that used to work for an on-prem application, if we move it to the cloud, that same data model won't apply. So we always say, like, you can automate a lot of the things when moving to the cloud, but there are some, we call reimagine. Like you need to put things in order to know how to reapply to the new technology, the new environment, what makes sense, what features you have that you can do better. I normally do the analogy sometimes that this is, if we have, if we go to the Industrial Revolution and we were having horses and we just, instead of bringing a bulldozer, a tractor to help us with the fields, we just put machines to the hordes and continue with the same speed the hordes were having, and we just use the machine to give water to the hordes. That's somehow what we're seeing in a lot of cases. We have one recently that a customer, a big pharma company, was saying, like, hey, we're moving to the cloud, we're having performance issues. They moved to the cloud, and in reality, those performance issues got amplified. And the piece, it goes to, like, you from the perspective of the user, you don't want to do a lift and shift. Like, you can use a lot of new technologies that can increase the adoption. But from the technical perspective, you need to make sure that those things is, like, you're taking care of all like data model, things that you weren't really using, how you can simplify. Otherwise, those things are getting amplified, and are getting amplified even, let's put an example that we were having a community of 100 users, then we will have a community with 100 users. If we think that we're going to have agents even querying that same data, that problem is getting amplified really quick.
Yeah. And that's a very, very, very good point here, especially around performance. I think there's a research by TWI that says that 44% of dashboards migrated to the cloud show no performance improvement at all, and probably a fraction of that deterioration. It's actually no surprise, right? If you think about it physically, in the cloud, if you move data around and if you import data and you have reload tasks in your BI tooling, moving from one cloud provider to the BI tool, that's going to take longer per se. So the reloading that was actually quite, maybe you got away with doing that quite fast on premise, and the extracts are going to take longer, may fail more often. And we're going to talk about security later. So that is kind of one approach. You cannot take the same on-premise design and take it to the cloud, especially around performance and big data sizes. I would say there's also the element of lack of parity. So there is, for example, limited extension support in BI in the cloud, in Tableau and in Click, for example. Not all the reload tasks are possible. So it's not a lift and shift. It is, you have to already rebuild at very minimum to begin with. And that has ultimately, an impact that people do not expect. So probably recommendation here is, try it with a very small project, very distinct, closed, and see actually what you didn't expect isn't going to be necessary as part of a migration in such an instance. Or, of course, as you mentioned, maybe use a different technology or approach, right? Reimagine things.
Yeah, and even one of the pieces, for example, that in the past used to apply, like if we go to IBM, SAP, Oracle, in terms of one vendor giving me everything, that approach, even if we use Gartner recommendations, what they say is you need to use an open platform for your data platform that is open and universal, so you can change models. So even if we're talking about BI, the last thing you want is BI to handle your data transformations, your data ingestion, like the whole logic. And that's really from where we're coming. Like if when we're moving to the cloud, we need to think also that I don't want the BI to handle my data transformations. I don't want BI to handle my security access to data. I don't want the BI to, become like a bottleneck. Then whatever decision I want to make, I'm locked into my BI.
You don't want BI to become a warehouse anymore in the cloud. So I'm going to talk about that point. That's actually a very interesting one. But the promise of the cloud is lower TCO, right? That's the big motivation, big move. But I hear from Ventana, for example, 60% of organizations underestimate the BI costs. And Gartner actually says the number one thing that everybody didn't think of is the data egress fees. So importing data from one cloud provider to your BI tool that sits in another provider, that costs extra money that you're not aware of. So what's your experience with like for like or surprises around the costs and licensing overall?
The piece goes into, I will even start with the issues that a lot of companies are getting. So at the moment you're in the cloud and you allow, for example, someone to create a report, that report is badly developed in terms of what queries they're using because they don't know how to code, or they create the wrong join. At the end, you will see that on the consumption of your database. And that's one of the fears a lot of companies continue saying, hey, I'm in the cloud, but then I will use this technology for in memory that is fully disconnected. So you follow a cloud strategy, but then you dump everything into files locally into folders, and you load them into your BI. That's one of the biggest pain we're seeing. The other one we're seeing that is creating hidden costs for customers are the AI generated insights. When we go with that, is customers getting to, I need to have AI. My users are asking me for a chatbot or for real-time insights on my BI, or I want to create a presentation that is giving certain analysis already for the people that are preparing the meeting. The issue is when they start using the models behind, it goes with different licensing pricing. They're expensive, and that's the piece where instead of getting adoption, companies stop using them. Like they think everything works this way. But in general, like meaning, I always say, like for example, with Power BI, like in Power BI, I think they position themselves on this battle with self-service, where everyone was saying we have self-service, but in reality, in order for you to do self-service BI 5 years ago, you needed to be a good coder, a good developer. Like meaning, doing stuff with legacy BI or different technologies, you needed to be really an expert working with the technology. If you wanted to do a year to date, a rolling average things, do a comparison, do benchmarks. That's the piece that I think Power BI, by providing licensing to students, they started using and getting more familiar. Reality is, I don't know, you can upload an Excel and create metrics. The moment you start creating like complex calculation, that's a hidden cost as well. Like meaning, you don't realize it's not about just the licensing, but the effort you need to dedicate to create those calculations behind. You need developers. You need someone with knowledge on creating DAX expressions.
So I think that's a good point, right? And it's not just the cost in terms of locked-in BI logic, but also you amplify inconsistency of metrics. I think one thing that you mentioned there is performance equals costs in the cloud. The longer something is calculated, the longer it takes to calculate, the more you pay. That's the consumption-based model. So if you have a badly performing on-premise app that you got away with in the cloud, that will be expensive. I think one more point is the lack of transparent, pricing. As in Power BI, for example, says, I don't know, $14 per user per month. The reality is, in the cloud, you need premium capacity for enterprise scale. Actually, is it now becoming Microsoft Fabric license? Is a question mark. Click Cloud has data size limitations that didn't exist on premise. So all of a sudden that becomes a factor that also needs to be taken into account. And I think overall, if you have an on-premise perpetual license where you pay maintenance and you say, cool, all right, I'm going to move to the cloud. It's not going to be maintenance anymore. It's going to be the new SaaS subscription. So actually, the jump can be quite high there. That leaves organizations actually, I've had it a few times where they say, when I move to the cloud, but I cannot pay 4 times the same amount what we have now, right? So that is typically, a surprise. I would say, what's your recommendation on best approach this, other than not moving to the cloud?
We had it with I don't know, sometimes even I tried myself on when we say the word disruption and create disruption at Propelling Tech, because it creates like fear. As humans, we fear the change. So sometimes we modernize the whole data architecture and we use, I don't know, cloud data warehousing, we use data lakes, we use modern data transformation tools, we use data ingestion tools that are simplifying our data architecture. What we're finding is that on the BI, because it's the one that is hitting the users, companies are more afraid to make changes. We had a customer, one of, I don't know, top 5 pharmas globally, is where they were, one of the, is like their BI was 3 times their whole data framework. Like, and that's the piece that doesn't make any sense. Is in the past you were paying for something that is no longer needed. Like right now, what you need is something to consume your data. And even this is a conversation that I think goes into what is BI AI. Like if I'm a user, I'm not differentiating my use case. I might need AI, I might need BI, I might need reporting. And that's the piece that is shifting also in the market on when we discuss BI.
Super. So generally keep a track of the TCO and measure it at all times. So measuring actually consumption and licensing at any point in time becomes almost a work stream in its own way. So we spoke about this a little bit, which is, performance. You don't get away with it as easily in the cloud as you do on premise. Tech debt. So coming back to lift and shift, if you just lift and shift, in a sense, the mess that you have, that will actually amplify problems significantly. And Forrester, for example, research says companies that modernize BI during the migration are 2.5 more likely to hit adoption goals. What's kind of like your recommendation on what are the old problems you mostly see that you have to kill before they go to the
here? And even I think it starts with what drove our thinking on creating Propelling Tech is meaning what used to work in the past doesn't mean that it works today. Sometimes even when I think, oh my God, I built this thing 10 years ago, is like how I could really do this. Is the tools, I don't know, even the cost, the licensing, the access to the cloud, the access to certain technologies was more limited before. Now creating software is easier than any moment in our industry. I would say one of the biggest things that we're seeing in general, like when we look into this machine, is when we're doing a migration, even doing the migration itself is the biggest issue. Like I was having a conversation with a bank 2 weeks ago. Is a big, in fact, from UK, is headquartered in UK, and they were saying like, hey, we have this BI, is a pain. In summary, what is as a result, what we're getting is there are Excels 8 a.m. in the morning, not just flying between emails because we don't trust it. It doesn't perform. It's really disconnected from our enterprise data warehouse. But the cost to migrate is so high that it doesn't compensate us. And that's the piece that I think, starting from the migration, is like if you need to apply certain changes and you don't apply those changes because they're expensive. So it's like, okay, let me, I don't know, this hair here is okay. I will just keep it because it's too expensive to remove it. So just starting even with the migration process itself, when we look into migrations of 3-year timeline, it's like, oh my God, I don't want to go through that migration. I will let the BI die. And there are companies where I have conversations with them that literally they are crossing fingers to say Gen AI will replace BI. And there is going to be a point where ChatGPT will do BI for me. That is, it really comes back to what we were saying, is it's not about ChatGPT will replace BI, or even in the past we were saying here in this, dashboards are dead. Dashboards are not dead. Like you still need reports, you need dashboards, you need scorecards, you need, I don't know, sometimes you need a PDF report. Sometimes you need an Excel report. Sometimes you need to do a forecast. But what have changed is you need everything in one place rather than looking into different applications. So I would say with the migration process, and I don't know, my people will kill me, but I think it starts even with the consulting companies just migrating with the past because it's more profitable. It gives you more revenue. Like if everyone is migrating in 3 years, why I want to do it in months if everyone is using the same method of doing it in years? So I think this is something that is adding into it's creating complexity. Then when we are migrating, the first thing we need to make sure is everything needed? Like we don't want to migrate 100%. Like no, everything is needed, and that's the first analysis that we need to take before starting the migration. Then
that's a very good point, because there's this typical I think 6 R's of cloud, which is what do you retain, what do you refactor, and what you and what do you throw away. Continue.
It will, even if you have the storage for that in the future, it will continue amplifying. So there are things, reports you don't use, reports that are duplicated. This is the other thing with legacy BI was happening, is because it wasn't really fully connected, it was kind of creating hidden IT or of silos in your ecosystem. So it was hard to follow who was using what. Now in Cloud BI, you can follow to the query ID, so you can know, hey, these people are using same data set, so they could leverage the same reporting. So those things can help you reduce a lot of the scope on a migration. Then, of course, using modern technology to automate a lot of those migrations, and then reimagine, applying with what is needed for the, I don't know, the new technology. It doesn't make any sense. Even inside a same toolkit, if we're moving from an on-prem to the cloud, you cannot really move the same app. Even if you think it's a copy paste, it won't work. Like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
We had it with a customer, for example, they were using a Click, they were having community sheets, that is a way of creating collaboration inside apps. When they went to the cloud, those community sheets became just tabs. So in 5 or 200 tabs. And what you end with that is that everyone stops using that report if you just migrate it in that way.
That's a very good point. That speaks also to the user experience. I would say, just to add to that, obviously I see this a little bit as a bigger movement. I call this the shifting left. What made BI quite good, and was a great solution to a problem 15 years ago where data was inaccessible, warehouses were slow and fast to move, they became great because they became almost like their own little warehouse. You can take the data out, you can ingest, you can store it in proprietary formats, you can do modeling, you can blend a spreadsheet. I mean, I have done so much click scripting, for example, and I'm pretty sure there are many out there who can do very talented DAX expressions. But that logic is contained within the BI tool now, cannot be reused. A person leaves, so now you need somebody with DAX expertise who maintains that. And you mentioned, consultancies love getting paid to maintain, BI. And I think, that's a problem that needs to move regardless. I call this shifting left, where you move all the logic of the BI into the cloud data platform, where it should live, because it is SQL based, much more easier and popular language to go. And obviously, when we talk about storage and also the ingestion mechanisms, like, they're much more innovative. It can do much more than a BI tool could ever do. Think of, for example, also Python and many more adjacent workloads. And then visualization becomes just the presentation layer. So what you mentioned, like, whatever is visible in the BI is coming from trusted, governed data that is being maintained, for example, using the medallion architecture, bronze, silver, gold. And that creates not just consistency of metrics, but one single source of truth. And that's a shift that needs to happen effectively, regardless, because, as you mentioned, AI cannot report on top of BI dashboards. It needs to report on top of the data itself. So the reusability becomes super critical. And I think the problem is amplified in the cloud because the data volumes are increasing, the velocity is increasing. So what maybe was not too expensive to bother migrating now will become triple more expensive in the near future for a business that wants to stay relevant. And I think that'll be the point, that it needs to be done. It's just a matter of timing. So choose the timing sooner than later, effectively. So we spoke about a couple of things, like the end user experience, right? That is not the same. You mentioned community sheets in, for example, Click Cloud versus on-premise. It's absolutely true. There's lack of parity still. There's maybe some things being called differently within the cloud solution versus in the on-premise. So it requires some level of rethinking, readjusting, retraining in some instances. So cloud is great. Migrating to the cloud is fantastic. I get all the infrastructure, but an end user doesn't care about that. For them, it's just another tab. Why should they suffer changing from one to the other? What's your experience on solving that, or other stories?
And I think this goes even into, I don't know, when, like, we came from reporting and then going into what you were saying with BI and solving a lot of issues like customers were having 15 years ago. For some time, it became kind of a feature game, like, meaning There were companies that specialize in specific features. So it really ended, I don't know, looking into customers where they have different BI technologies. The one that goes to the field, the one that they use for self-service, the one that is more conversational analytics. So for the user, it's like moving between one technology to the other. And or either you create a web development, so you're putting a web in between all those technologies. You think you're creating something super smart, but then you're adding another component to manage in between all those technologies. From the consulting point of view, this is like a gold mine. Like, I mean, you have so many points that can fail. That is where you can continue, in theory, adding value by helping your customer to grow those things. In reality, right now, it focuses more on what we were saying, the adoption of the user. Like, what is that you need as a user? So sometimes, for example, on BI wasn't really focused on the opposite. Like, it is more like writing. So right now, when you're working with data, you might need to write data back. The last thing you want is to, no, I need a custom development, or I need another extension, or I need another company to embed inside my technology. Is I just want to do it with the data I have right now. Or maybe I need to do a forecast, a simulation with the data, with a model a data scientist created for me. I don't want to go to another technology. So that's the piece that I think is, from the adoption point of view, is the same thing of consuming from an app. Is like, imagine if we go to our, I don't know, car app, and we need to switch from apps, like, hey, for lights, go to Philips app, and then for music, go to Sonos, and it becomes a mess. You just want to go into your car, your TV, and be there in the app. I don't know, leveraging other technologies that might be inside the app. That's one thing that we're seeing. The other piece that we see on user adoption is what we were seeing before, or what we were saying before, with the false promise of self-service BI. So,
good point.
When you try to say to the customer, like, hey, you can leverage this thing on your own, it's really easy to do it. Like, I don't know if they leverage it because they're creating a team of power users working for them. But in reality, it becomes hard if you need to do the coding. If you're a business person and you need to do coding, then those things are reducing your adoption. Then the app or the report, whatever we call them, it will become more like I go there to check my sales, or if I get it as a PDF, or I get it as an Excel, but I don't know, I don't have anything else to get from there. Right now, with the new technologies, and even with Astrato, I sometimes tell customers and say, I don't know, in the past, you will never think you will create an app for the receptionist. But now you can create an app that handles entries, exits, things in minutes. Like, I mean, you could have something running in 20 minutes. If you don't like it, you drop it. But in the past, this will be a project itself as the one you will create for finance or for sales. And I think that's what is helping the adoption as well for customers.
I think that's a good point. I think because BI does a lot of data modeling, transformation, it's hard to develop a dashboard. Somebody told me 80% of time spent building a dashboard is actually the piping and the data side behind the scenes. And actually the UI is the fast thing, but people need to do the first thing, which requires coding. So self-service BI has as a result never been tremendously successful, but with a shift left approach that I've highlighted here, that is actually, for example, a possibility. So not just a benefit of moving logic to where it can be used, where it's more scalable, but also it can facilitate self-service BI. I would say to add to this as well is, I mean, obviously users are being told what to use, but reality is, the needs are changing, the demands are changing. They want more data sources, they want more functionality, they want to be able to class, to write back, to add comments, to segment, to and to implement workflows actually, and that is what will drive analytics to the wider, I would say, user group within an organization. So just taking what you had on premise for the last 5 or 10 years and just offering them, hey, this is now in the cloud. It's the same thing. Don't be surprised if this is not met with excitement. So, typically they say for somebody to switch technologies or switch, they need to see 10x incremental improvements, and that's possible, right? Because the cloud is not just a scalable database, it actually innovates a lot. So recommendation is make user adoption KPI, apply some product thinking. What is the problem we're solving? How can we go beyond that? Don't just lift shift and here's a link, and then you'll have much more success in our view. Which brings it to a different topic, which is sometimes not very, I would say, sexy, especially for users, right? They're like, oh, governance, security, what does it even mean? Trust me, if it's not secure, if it's not governed, it's going to be a huge nightmare. And I think what changes is you're now no longer hosting the infrastructure in-house. So you don't have it within your walls, but it sits somewhere freely on the internet. Actually, this means that it becomes much more different to implement it in government. What's your experience around that, like governance, security in the cloud versus on-premise within the world of cloud?
I think even on, like in the past, what we were saying, that the access was more restricted. You were handling certain things. Now you're in the cloud. You're there. You need to secure your data, so the data is more accessible. And if it's really built in the right way, people are going to use it more than before. The other piece on security that we see is, if we look into how data security was managed on BI, I don't know, a few years ago, is you needed to create models inside with coding, and I don't know, if you were doing a left join that wasn't really the proper left join, it was creating performance issues internally for that. But in reality, even if the customer was creating groups, he was building, saying, hey, this is high security, I don't know, someone could manually put an asterisk and give full access to someone, or give admin access.
Yeah,
it was something that it was really easy just to, I don't know, hack without being a hacker. The piece now, if we go into the new modern tools where your data is in the cloud, you don't want to handle the policies of security on your BI tool. You want to handle where the data is. And even, I don't know, we were saying that before, like with legacy BI, because BI wasn't built for the cloud. So basically we're just copying a technology used to work on-prem in the cloud. The way how they structure data for you to analyze is completely different. So basically we need to query all the data, put the data into the app, and then from the app, just, I don't know, extract, apply the filters. But in reality, you're bringing the data into your technology to work with your data, rather than making the other technology make a calculation like a rolling year or a year to date. That might be heavy calculations to handle without the filtering. And that's the piece that I think for technologies that are not built in the cloud, they're struggling with that. At the moment you bring data, you need to add security. And that's the piece. So the best one is, if you're a BI technology, is like, I don't want to handle the data. I want your policies to be managed on the back and keep it there. But we're seeing, I mean, we have a partner on data security, and it's surprisingly, every time we connect to do a POC, like how many hidden silos appear in the company that no one was aware that, I don't know, someone was replicating data with a BI tool or with scripting, or they have, I don't know, some coding internally with Python, and they were querying the data. So all that data, you think is just a query, but it's getting stored. That's the piece that I think a lot of companies weren't really paying attention. And now with AI, this thing can get amplified. We were having a customer
actually
on airplane manufacturer, and there are a few in the world, like basically, but they created a chatbot using AI, and providers could really go and check when they were getting an assignment, like, hey, you need to fix this thing with this part. But with the chatbot, you could query and make questions about your competition, like, hey, what is my competition having issues? So you will get all the feedback. These are the pieces that you think it will apply the same, but like, I mean, you need to manage in a different way. Like, you don't want to bring those data security policies into your site, and you need to monitor more often.
With every copy of the data, you lose governance and security, and you have to reapply it. And if you apply security fragmented across different tools, how are you going to ensure consistency? And on premise, maybe historically it was, okay, it's still our, infrastructure, our servers, it's okay-ish. But now that you host the data outside, what if you have a leak? There are penalties, there are new rules, regulation. You see that all the time when data starts leaking, that there are, serious repercussions, which is, by the way, also, a governance is cited as being, the number one barrier to cloud BI adoption by organizations. So, a recommendation, mine here is, first of all, use a zero copy architecture. So live query, never extract, because that simplifies things, because you can just inherit the security policies and do it well done once. And obviously, involve InfoSec early, use single sign-on, don't have different user logins for different tools. That's a nightmare.
It is, I don't know, we were saying it's not sexy for users, but for a user, it affects the adoption if you have the wrong security set up for them.
Exactly. So this is one of the very first things you have in place. You don't want this to become okay, we're ready to roll out. And then InfoSec or compliance comes back, wait, no, doesn't work. That completely stalls the project at a very late stage. So that's, and we spoke a lot of things, and I think this all kind of boils down to the very last pitfall. And I think, we mentioned a couple of keywords here, but moving to the cloud is not just a problem that we have today, for example, reducing costs or making sure I can, connect better to cloud data warehouse. But if you ignore, like, hey, where's the journey going to take me, and assess, the readiness of the direction, that is another common pitfall, where you just stick with the same brand. You go from Power BI on premise to Power BI cloud, and then you realize I'm stuck with Azure. I cannot go to AWS, or I have other problems there. What is your view around? You mentioned writeback, AI,
I think it's like meaning even AI BI is becoming one. Another thing that is important is we were talking about the BI evolution, and I think also a lot of vendors and companies in the market are failing. Is they think BI is evolving. Of course, it's evolving. Like, meaning you want AI, you want chatbots, you want insight, but it doesn't mean you don't want your PDF report. It doesn't mean you don't want to have the writeback capabilities. It doesn't mean you want to have a corporate dashboard or a field dashboard. So BI is evolving, but you want to have access to all the different BI modes when you're interacting with them. The other piece goes into, I don't know, when we're saying AI and even AI, we're talking like you need to give volumes of data in order to start making decisions and to do things. That's the other piece that we see with customers. They migrate to BI and they get like, okay, this is what we were able to do. This is what we're able to do here is okay, because this is where we were, rather than comparing. And that's what I call keeping the pace. Like, you do because someone else is doing, or you keep it because it's what you think is what is in the market. We had it with a customer where, in fact, we were showing Astrato, and they were saying, no, we're fine. We have our BI tool, this corporate dashboard. We're doing this. It's like, yeah, but let us try it. You will see it. It's like we went through the connections, everything. They gave us the table. We connected with the table. They gave us the fields, and we query, and then we got the answer. And they were saying it's impossible. It's like, why? because we haven't been able to query this table. It's a table with billions of records, and we were just showing you that it doesn't matter. Whatever you connect, nothing is going to work. So from there, we started working on more operational analytics, like how, in this case, the vehicles are getting charged all over the different cities in real time. So like, I mean, we're saying about high volumes of data. We had it also with an airline that wanted to do monitoring in real time of passengers getting through security and boarding the plane. So if we multiply that by planes over the world in real time, it's not a use case you can handle easily with any BI tool. And those are the cases where we are going. Even if we look into Databricks, Snowflake, how they are calling in their conference, they are no longer saying BI, AI separate. They call it AI BI as one unique concept. And I think that's where we want to go. I mean, you have your data, you want to consume it, but it needs to be modern, prepared for what is coming. And what is coming is, referencing to your graphic, is more data.
Yeah. And I think that's the point. More data is coming, but with more data, it just doesn't mean more reports. We also need new ways to consume this data. I think there's a high-level slide here that actually Propelling Tech has prepared, which shows a little bit of a journey from static reporting to visualizations. There will always be a need for visualizations and for static reporting, but then there are net new use cases. AI, BI, data apps is another example where you can write back. You can use Python to embed it for advanced analytics. So the use cases actually will become many more. And if you choose a technology to move to the cloud that just does reporting, for example, just visualizations, that's it. You're locked in, right? You will, best case, you will get another tool that does the other things, and then you have a problem. You have two different tooling. But you may actually, if you look and modernize it, be in a position where you are both ready for the future, but also get the basics implemented here.
And it's the same with conversational analytics. Like, I mean, when it came before COVID, it was, I don't know, I would say pretty clever, like applying Google into your data. I don't know, to be honest, Gen AI killed all that feature. Like, I mean, in any technology with Gen AI can get empowered with conversational analytics. So at the end, what you want is, you want an open architecture where you can change components, but also when you're working with the technology, you want the technology to be open, that is easy to update and get things. The last thing you want is that the technology is not evolving, so you work with the core technology, and then you're working with another vendor that is adding you writeback or is adding you visualizations, because you're not really covering that in the middle. And I think, I don't know, rules have changed a little bit, and they will continue changing with more volume, more use cases. You need to be prepared for those new use cases. And the last thing you want is to be your BI behaving as your data warehouse.
I think these are very good points as a recommendation, right? So open architecture, interoperability between different data sources, not being locked into a cloud provider or a cloud data source, and being able to change. So you can always pick the right winner with a little migration effort. I think the other thing that you mentioned as well is, look at the current BI vendor and what is their vision? What direction are they going to go? For example, my understanding is that Tableau got acquired by Salesforce. So the actual push is to get Tableau more embedded into the Salesforce ecosystem and their adjacent products. Is that a priority for you? For example, Power BI has one mission: Microsoft Fabric. It is almost like a lead demand generation product that has the main goal to move as much workloads to Azure. What happens if the best AI model will be in Google? Well, but you're in Azure locked in, right? So, vendor follow their own SaaS roadmaps. So it is to also have a look at this and making sure that it is following the vision that you want to follow as well. And AI readiness is a top BI migration driver as a whole. Thank you for that. So yeah, to summarize, the pitfalls which we spoke about, and Alejandro kindly shared war stories from the front. Lift and shift doesn't mean cloud native, I would say. So evaluate it on a little project to see how much lift and shift is actually a reality or not, right? And assess then which direction, how you want to go. So do it in stepwise. That comes in with costs and licensing. Expecting that you're going to have the same licensing cost on premise as on the cloud just doesn't work, given its nature of being consumption driven. Is it going to be cheaper or not? Make sure you're not surprised. Refactor, redo, discard reports that you don't need. I think it's a good moment to avoid to take your lessons learned and prepare them well for the cloud, to ultimately drive user adoption and success, not just with the same reports, but also there's more data, there's more need for data, more use cases, new ways of working with data, conversational with GenAI, writeback, operational applications. That's an opportunity that you need to drive forward, and make sure you do not ignore security. Put it at the very beginning, because that can very often become a sorry, this is not going to work situation that can almost delay projects significantly. Anything else you might like to add, Alejandro?
No, I think is you perfectly summarize it. I think that the last one is the key one for me, because at the end is you're doing a migration to prepare for the future. You're not doing a migration to continue keeping the pace on what it is needed today. And the future is more AI, more automation, more having users, but agents connecting with your data, and more volume. That data volume, it's like you want performance. Like, it's not that you want to, I don't know, forget about the performance, the usability, because all those things are going to affect your adoption on the users.
And as I said, performance equals cost in the cloud. And I think that's a very, very good point. Move away from solving the problem of today to understanding how we'll solve it today, but how it will look like in the next 3-4 years. You don't want to be in a situation where you will have to do another migration. That's the most expensive of them all. Obviously, Alejandro has a lot of experience, hands-on projects, so ping him, reach out if you have any questions, any challenges that you have on top of your mind. Honestly, the whole Propelling Tech team is full future visionaries. They take bets, and all they care about is creating value for clients fast. Sometimes doing themselves a disservice because they're too fast, effectively. But cool. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening in. Alejandro, thanks for your stories. And yeah, we'll be in touch. And make sure to add us on LinkedIn or to reach out to us. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Martin.